1942, July. The Bay of Biscay. It was dark, darker than anything you ever saw. Like being inside a boot. You're up there in a Wellington bomber, engines just roaring, those Bristol Hercules engines. You feel 'em in your marrow, vibrating right through your boots. Jefferson Greswell, he's at the stick. His hands are cold, sort of stiff, knuckles white as bone against the dark leather. He's staring at that radar screen, that little flickering blue light. It's the only thing that ain't pitch black in that cabin. Then, there, a blip, a jagged little ghost on the glass, right under the belly of the plane. A Kraut. One of those U-boats, Sargon, surfacing for air, recharging those batteries. Jefferson, he holds his breath. I remember doing that back in basic, just holding it until your chest feels like it's going to pop. He starts his run. Lower in the nose, the wind whistling through the geodetic frame. Then, poof, the screen goes fuzzy, static, sea return. Or maybe just the Atlantic deciding it wanted to keep its secrets. Everything's blind. Just blind. You can't see the white caps, can't see the horizon. But you hear it. That muffled, frantic hooting of the German alarm down there. They only need 23 seconds. That's all it takes for a Type 7 to slide back into the deep. 23 seconds to vanish. Greswell. He pulls the lever, throws the depth charges into the abyss. Splash, splash. Nothing but empty, angry water. A prayer to a God that wasn't listening that night. Those poor bastards down there. Well, they just laughed and slipped away, and we just flew on, feeling like fools. We were losing. Pure and simple, back in London. Well, the cupboards were looking thin. Ships were burning out there in the cold Atlantic. 400,000 tons of steel and meat and grain every single month, just sinking into the mud. Britain only had 12 weeks of bread left, just 12. 12 weeks between a victory and a total, hollow collapse. It was a disgrace, a real shame. We were drowning, sort of drowning because we couldn't see the hand in front of our own faces. All we had was the smell of stale, burnt coffee, the itch of those heavy wool uniforms, and that blue radar glow making everyone look like ghosts in a flying coffin. It's funny how small things stick with you, like the metallic taste of fear in the back of your throat, like chewing on a spent shell casing, or the way the engines sounded when you knew you'd missed. We were just blind men, swinging at shadows. Waitley, no, waiting for the dark to finish us off. I remember looking at Jefferson. His face was it was empty, tired. We all were. The fatigue, it sits on you like a lead blanket. You're so tired your eyes start to play tricks, seeing things that ain't there. But the U-boats, they were real enough, and they were winning. The only thing left was the hum of the Bristol Hercules and the sight of the moon. Just a cold, white coin hanging over a graveyard of ships. Heck, we didn't think we'd see the sun again. Just an image of the dark water closing over a conning tower, and the silence that follows. It's the loudest thing you ever heard. Sort of. RAF Chivener, Devon. It's 1942 and the rain just won't quit. Just a constant gray drizzle tapping on the corrugated iron roof. It makes this hollow, lonely sound. Like the world's just a big, empty drum. There's a shed near the edge of the airfield. Smells like aviation spirit and old grease and that damp, earthy smell of wet wool. And Humphrey Lee is right in the middle of it. He's 44. An old man, long jalam cam. As some of the younger boys probably thought, heck, he was flying crates before most of those doughboys could even shave. He ain't got a degree. He ain't an engineer. He's just a pilot who's tired of being blind. He's hunched over a workbench. The light is dim. Just a single bulb hanging from a frayed wire, swaying in the draft. Hands, black, with engine, oil. Ripping apart car headlights he found in a scrapyard. The brass, the air ministry, no, the engineering boys with their polished boots and their clipboards. They're stood in the doorway yelling about regulations. They're screaming about a Thiet KFFAP, an illegal experiment. You're wasting military property, they bark. You're violating directives. They're talking about court-martials, stripping his rank, throwing him in the brig. A real mess. But Leigh, well, he just keeps soldering. He didn't care for their slide rules or their equations. He knew the experts were wrong. He needed light. More than he needed their permission. He was building a Kwai Vat Ngon, a monster, a beast of a searchlight, 24 inches of heavy naval glass. It was going to eat electricity like a starving animal, pulling power that would blow every fuse in a Wellington. You could hear the thief's hand, the solder, hissing when the iron hit the wire. A sharp, acidic smell that bites at your nose and stays in the back of your throat. Blue sparks dancing across the bench and casting long, jittery shadows on the oily walls. I remember a fella back in basic, Camp Crowder, who tried to rig a radio out of a bed frame and some copper wire. Everyone laughed at him too, called him a crackpot until he got a signal from 1,000 miles away. Leigh? Well, he just looked him in the eye and said, "If it don't work, I'll personally dismantle every component and go to prison." Simple as that. He was trading his whole future for a pile of scrap metal and a chance to see the enemy. It wasn't about the math for him. It was about the dark, the way the Atlantic just swallowed men whole because they couldn't see the hand in front of their faces. It was a metallic taste in the mouth, fear, and desperation. His back was aching from the damp Devon air. The cold was deep in his joints, but he just kept twisting those copper wires, tightening the bolts with a wrench that had seen better days, waiting for the spark, waiting to turn on the sun. His though may, his mechanics. They were working in the shadows too, hiding the parts whenever the CO walked by. It was a secret war inside a real one, a mess of wires and hope, and the smell of ozone, staying with you like a ghost you can't shake. He just wiped his hands on a greasy rag, took a sip of cold, tinny tea, and kept on working. He didn't have the consensus, he just had the dark, and a car headlight, and a dream that everyone said was impossible. Life's messy like that. You have to break the rules to save the people who made them. He was just a middle-aged squadron leader. But in that shed, he was the only one who could see the light, sort of tragic, and sort of beautiful. Depending on how you look at it, he just kept on wiring, ignoring the shouts, waiting for the night to explode into noon. Imagine, skimming the waves at 50 feet. It's black. Pitch black, like being buried inside a cold, wet boot, and you're flying a Wellington, basically a giant kite made of lattice and doped fabric. And Humphrey, well, he wants to shove a battleship's eye right under your feet, a carbon arc searchlight, 22 million candles. They called it suicide science. You know, the engineers, they'd stand in the shadows with their slide rules, shaking their heads. The heat'll melt the skin right off the bones. The arc'll blind the pilot. The generators, well, they'll just explode. They had 1,000 reasons why it was impossible. But Humphrey, he didn't care for their reasons. He was in that shed, smelling of ozone and solder and that stale tobacco that never leaves your wool coat. He had to make a choice, a hard one. He ripped out the bomb racks, the whole reason we were out there, and he stuffed the belly of the plane with lead-acid batteries, heavy, greasy, monsters. The plane, it groaned, literally groaned, geodetic frame creaking and rumbly. No, it was complaining under all that lead, click, clunk, every time they hoisted another rack in. It reminds me of back in basic training, trying to pack a rucksack until the seams started to scream. That's how the Wellington felt, taxiing out like a lead anchor with wings. The boys in the mess, they had a name for it, the Leigh Light. They'd say it with a smirk, a real knee slapper. Thought it was a toy. Look at Lee and his big flashlight, while they were knocking back warm ale. But inside that hangar, the air felt, well, it felt electric. You could feel the hair on your arms stand up when they tested the load. And the smell, that sharp, metallic ozone that bites at the back of your throat. It stays with you, like the metallic taste of fear, or chewing on a copper penny, and the radiator. Shh! Hissing away, trying to keep the whole thing from melting into a puddle of slag. Humphrey didn't have much to say, just kept twisting those thick, black cables, hands, stained with oil and defiance. He was building a sun, a piece of the afternoon, out of scrap metal and hope. He knew the experts were just waiting for a fireball, waiting for him to fail so they could say, "I told you so." But he was waiting for the moment when the dark couldn't hide the krauts anymore. We were trading our bombs for a look at the enemy. It was a gamble. Flying a bomber that couldn't bomb, just hoping that 3 seconds of light would be enough to change the world, and the airframe, it just kept on groaning, like it knew it wasn't meant to carry that kind of burden. But we did it anyway. Ghosts in a flying power station, waiting for the spark, waiting for the night to die. Sort of makes you wonder what it feels like to bet your whole life on a pile of junk. But in 42, junk was all we had, and the silence in that shed. It was heavier than the batteries, just the hiss of the radiator and the scratching of a screwdriver, and the knowledge that out there, in the black, the U-boats were still waiting. Comfortable, thinking they owned the night. They didn't know about the Leigh Light, didn't know about the man with the solder and iron. They didn't know the sun was coming for them. At least, that was the plan. Life's messy like that. You break the rules to save the ones who made them. Humphrey just kept wiring, eyes bloodshot, breath smelling of tinny tea, building his artificial sun, fragment by fragment, and the weight. Lord, the weight of it all. It never really leaves you. Just like the smell of the ozone. Funny how small things stick with you. Like the way the shadow of the searchlight housing looked on the hangar floor. Long and crooked. Just like our chances. But we were done with being blind. We were ready to burn, sort of. And the way the fabric of the plane ran wry, well, creaked under the strain, like it was trying to tell us something. But we weren't listening. We were just looking for the light. Those poor bastards didn't see it coming. The experts, or the krauts. But in that greasy shed, Humphrey was turning scrap into a miracle, or a disaster, depending on the next 3 seconds. Sort of tragic. You know, how much we had to give up just to see. But the dark, well, the dark was winning, and we needed a flashlight. Even if it was a suicide science, the heat was real, the weight was real. And the silence, well, that was the realest thing of all. We just kept wiring and waiting for the night to end. Fragment by fragment, copper by copper, just ghosts in a shed, waiting for the sun to fire. June 3rd, 1942, and the Bay of Biscay is just a vast, empty, black hole. You're sitting in the cockpit of Wellington ES-986, and you can feel the vibration of the Bristol engines right through the seat of your pants. It's a low, heavy thrum, sort of a heartbeat for the whole mission. The air in the cabin is freezing. But Humphrey, well, he's got sweat running down the back of his neck. Cold sweat. Bet din? Well, it's sticky under his wool flight suit. It smells like stale coffee and that heavy, metallic scent of 1,000 lead batteries humming in the dark. Those illegal batteries. The ones the brass said would pull the wings off the plane. It's a suicide run. That's what the crew is thinking, though nobody's saying it. Not out loud. You just hear the scratchy, rhythmic static of the ASV radar operator over the intercom. Contact, he whispers. 12 miles ahead, a ghost on the screen. Humphrey pulls the nose down, slow, easy, until we're skimming the waves at 50 feet. You can almost hear the water slap the belly of the plane. He's holding the stick so tight his knuckles are white as bone. His hands are cramped, but he don't let go. He can't. He's staring through the windscreen into a bucket of ink. Absolute, total blackness, no horizon, no moon, just the knowledge that death is right in front of him. Recharge, no. The U-boat is surfacing for air. It's the Luigi Torelli, an Italian sub, just sitting there fat and happy, thinking the night is her shield, the crew on her deck. They're probably having a smoke, looking at the stars, thinking they're safe. 100 yards? The navigator calls it out. 70 yards, 50 yards, and then it happens. God flips a switch. Humphrey reaches for that unauthorized toggle. He flips it, and jum. But it ain't a sound. It's the light. 22 million candles. Pure. Blinding. White. Light ripping the night into shreds. It's like the world just ended and started over in the same second. It's so bright it's painful, even in the cockpit. But down there, Lord, the sea is a stage, and the Torelli is front and center. She's frozen, caught like a deer in the headlights of a car. The conning tower is gleaming silver. The wake is white as snow. And the men, you can see their faces for 3 seconds. You see them scramble, hands over their eyes, blinded by a sun they didn't think existed at 2 a.m. They don't even reach for the guns. They can't see them. 3 seconds. That's all the math gives you. Humphrey's bombardier, he's got his thumb on the release. He don't need to guess anymore. He sees the target like it's high noon. Depth charges away. Splash, splash, splash. 6 of them falling in a perfect line. And then, poof, the switch goes off. The light is gone. The night is back. Even darker than before. But you hear it? That massive white roar of the water. And then, the groan. That sick, crunching sound of a pressure hull getting squeezed like an empty tin can. The smell of ozone is choking now. Catlet, well, it's bitter. Like burnt hair and sulfur and electric fire. Humphrey, he's breathing hard, sucking in that cold, thin air. The metallic taste of fear, or maybe triumph, sitting on his tongue. He reaches for the radio. His hand is shaken, just a little, but his voice is steady. The device functions perfectly. That's all he says. Just 4 words to change the whole damn war. It reminds me of that time in basic when we finally got a jammed the cold rifle to fire after everybody said it was scrap. That sense of, well, of wonder. Those poor bastards down there. They never saw it coming. They were fighting a war of shadows, until the light came and turned them into targets. Funny how small things stick with you. Like the way the shadows of the instrument panel looked when that beam hit the water. Long, jagged, like the teeth of a saw. Life's messy like that. You trade a career and a cage in the brig for 3 seconds of ban-ngai, of daylight, and you win. Humphrey just turned the Bay of Biscay into a slaughterhouse, and the only thing left in the air was the smell of burnt wire and the knowledge that the night, well, the night didn't belong to the U-boats anymore. It was a victory of scrap metal and car parts and pure, stubborn defiance. Just an image of white spray and black oil and the silence of a man who just brought the sun down to earth. Sort of tragic and sort of beautiful, depending on which side of the light you're on, but mostly, it was just the end of the dark. He didn't want the medals. He didn't want the glory. He just wanted to see, and for those 3 seconds, he saw everything. It turned into a graveyard, a real Thung Lung Chet, Valley of Death. That's what the Krauts called it, the U-boat boys. They were terrified, you know? Imagine being in one of those tin cans, 100 feet of cold, black Atlantic over your head. You're suffocating. The air gets thick, smells like sour sweat and battery acid and, well, and unwashed men. You can't even strike a match because there ain't enough oxygen. So they wait for the night. They pray for the black. They think the Atlantic is a big, dark blanket they can hide under. They surface at 2 a.m. thinking the dark's their friend. And then, click. The sun falls from the sky, pins you to the waves like a beetle on a board. 22 million candles just, well, it's enough to burn your eyes right out. Admiral Dunitz, he was a cold fish, but even he felt the chill. He'd see the reports. U-boat such and such, failed to report, again and again, poof, gone into the silence. He called it Das de Tod, the light of death. You know, because once that beam hit you, you were already dead. You just didn't know it yet. 3 seconds, that's all it took. 3 seconds to see the target, 3 seconds to drop the depth charges. And then the night would close back in. But the sub would be gone, crushed like a tin can under a boot. Dunitz. He couldn't wrap his head around it. How were we seeing him? He thought we had some kind of magic eyes. He thought it was radar. He thought it was some kind of devilry. He never guessed it was just an old pilot with a soldering iron and a pile of car headlights. They were like rats in a bucket. Surface by day. Get hit by a Beaufighter or a Liberator circling like hawks. Surface by night. Get hit by the light. There was no breathing room. None. 41 submarines in 5 months. Think about that. Before Lee, we were lucky to hit one in a whole year. 100-fold jump in the kill rate. Just like that. It was a massacre. A cull. I remember the radio operators sitting there with their headsets, just static. Then a sudden, high-pitched, frantic scream in German. Then, splash. Then that terrible, empty silence. Only the sound of the waves slapping the hull. It was a metallic taste. Fear. You could smell the ozone from the lamps long after the plane landed. It stuck to your flight suit. Sharp. Like a lightning strike. It was a turning point. The kind you feel in your gut. We'd finally turned the tide. And the Biscay? It just kept on swallowing him until the night didn't feel like a friend to him no more. Just a trap waiting to spring. Sort of tragic. If you don't think too much about the merchant ships they sank. We weren't just blind men swinging at shadows anymore. We'd become the things that owned the night and the Krauts Well, those poor bastards finally knew what it felt like to be the prey. The floor of the bay was already paved with German steel, just ghosts and rust down there now, and the echo of an alarm, a koi bao jong, that never got to finish its song, just 3 seconds of blinding white, and then just the cold and the dark and the silence of the bay. 1946, and the world's finally trying to dry itself off. Sort of. The sirens are gone, replaced by the sound of hammers and the smell of fresh plaster in the streets of London. You'd think there'd be a parade, a line of brass bands for the man who turned the night into a trap. But Humphrey, well, he just wasn't that kind of fella. 1,800 planes had his illegal light by the end. 1,800 suns flying through the black. 400,000 boys, sailors, merchantmen, boys from the Midwest and the docks of Liverpool. They got to go home. They got to see their mothers again because an old man in a shed refused to be blind. It's a big number, 400,000. But back then, well, we didn't count them like that. We just counted the nights we didn't drown. Leigh, he didn't ask for a medal. He didn't want the interviews or the shined-up shoes of a hero. He just went back to the ink and the paper, a quiet desk job. Like he'd never seen the Atlantic on fire. Funny how small things stick with you. Like the way he looked in that old photo. Just tired. Eyes always searching for something in the dark. You go to the museum now, the RAF museum at Hendon, and you see it, the prototype. It ain't pretty. It's rusty, G-set, and crude, though catch. Just a mess of scrap metal, and wires and hope held together by sheer defiance. It looks like junk, like something you'd find behind a garage. But it saved an empire. Leigh, he told him, it worked because of the heroes who flew it. Tell their stories, not mine. He preferred the dark, I guess. Or maybe he just knew that once the light goes out, the only thing that matters is who's still standing. Sort of makes you think, you know? We don't need saints. We just need a better flashlight and someone brave enough to flip the switch. Gat Kong tack. The sunset. It's turning the sea red now, looking like a cemetery of waves. And it's quiet. So quiet. Just the sound of the tide and the knowledge that the dark didn't win. Not this time. Just an image of that rusty lamp sitting in a glass case while the Atlantic keeps its secrets, sort of.